All right, let's speak more about this and bring in our guest. Javas Bigambo is a lawyer and governance analyst and joins us now live from Kenya. Javas, it's great to have you on the SABC News channel. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. Before we get into some of the legal issues at play here, let me just get a sense as a start of what you reckon Kenya is like the morning after.
Well, there is so much of the after effect of yesterday's demonstrations. There are lots of fumes of tear gas in the air, a couple of roads still having boulders, and the tires that were burned yesterday. But of course, a bit of anxiety with lots of businessmen and women counting their losses across close to 27 counties in the country, where lots of shops were looted, property destroyed, families are having some of their members injured, and some having lost their family members. So there's still a bit of anxiety, and government, civil society organizations are still trying to put their numbers together, checking with the hospitals to establish the accurate number of those that were injured, and also the security agencies trying to analyze the situation as it played out yesterday.
Of course, yesterday was about marking a year since the anti-tax bill protest rocked parts of Nairobi. We know the bill has since been withdrawn, and the protest has really morphed into an outcry about how police respond to civilians, to put it quite plainly. What's your sense about whether or not police are getting better at clamping down on protests like what we saw yesterday? Perhaps clamping down is not the right term, but responding to protests like what we saw yesterday, given, of course, what's at the heart of the discontent?
I think from a comparative point of view, I would say that there was a slight change this year, because on the eve of the demonstrations, we saw the Inspector General of Police with other police agencies and senior officials outlining and giving guidelines to the protesters and organizers to follow a particular path and guidelines. Of course, that is provided for in the laws in Kenya, in the Public Order Act, particularly Section 5. And we saw, of course, various agencies, organizations, civil society notifying the police of the intended demonstrations. The police were emphatic that they should be peaceable and unarmed. So that was seen. However, on the morning of the demonstrations yesterday, a number of roads leading to Parliament and the State House were barricaded. I think this was a proactive action to stop the protesters from getting to certain protected areas such as the State House, etc. So we saw that. Nonetheless, the other thing that we can indicate is that there was a bit of restraint by police officers in terms of using firepower. Those still cases of live ammunition and rubber bullets and tear gas were witnessed to be used yesterday. And that's why we saw a number of reported allegedly killed by police. Fatalities as of now are estimated to be 11, and various injuries of even police officers. We saw cases where police officers who were armed but were attacked by citizens, but they did not use the ammunition to fire at the citizens. This was reported in Kajiado County in a town called Kitengela, where 3 female officers were attacked by civilians. On a certain part of town still, we saw a police officer who was attacked by civilians, but did not use ammunition. We saw a section where in a county called Meru, where an officer commanding station was engaging the protesters in conversation. So we saw various places where police were engaging in civil ways with the civilians. So the deaths, of course, are regrettable, but this demonstrates that it is possible for police to continue restraining themselves in using excessive force and power against demonstrators.
We saw the state trying to respond to this, I suppose, in their own ways by giving a decree for there to be a ban on the broadcast of these protests yesterday. My understanding is that that decision was then overturned by the high courts. Help us to understand how that's actually affected the demonstration, if in any way at all.
Well, this speaks to the character of Kenya's democracy, because media freedom is an integral part of democracy and democratic progress. The fabric of democracy cannot be perfected or perfect without media freedom and the fundamental rights and freedoms enshrined in Kenya's Chapter 4 of the Bill of Rights, the right to protest, to demonstrate, but peaceable and unarmed. However, from a critical analytical perspective, I would say that the events of yesterday are calling upon government, upon opposition leaders and political parties, and even civil society organizations to be more alert and conscious about the nationhood of Kenya's nation state and the aspect of exercising fundamental rights without causing harm, injury, and even further economic injustices. As a matter of fact, we have seen an escalation of economic injustices when shops, supermarkets are vandalized and looted by demonstrators. When we see roads being barricaded, when demonstrators carry matchboxes and lighters, when they barricade roads and hamper the flow of traffic, when they interfere with the peace of those who are not part of the demonstrations, then the demonstrators also are infringing on the rights of those who do not want to be a part of the demonstrations. When political leaders in the opposition are using incendiary remarks to incite citizens into causing chaos and mayhem and attempt to overturn government against the constitutional order, it does not speak to the rights that are protected. So I think this is an invitation to a convergence of thought at the national level.
All right, but how does a decree to ban the broadcast of what's taking place help solve some of the issues that you just outlined? In fact, from the outside, it seems like a suffocation of the democratic space, if anything else.
I think it is regrettable that the Communication Authority used a sledgehammer on the media houses to try and hinder or stop media houses from live broadcast. That unilateral decision can be seen as an affront on media freedom. It should have been proper that the Communication Authority should have engaged beforehand with media houses on how they can conduct or air the demonstrations. Maybe it's possible that the Communication Authority was afraid that the live broadcast of the state of events as they were unfolding would incite or stir up other areas that were calm and not part of the demonstrations. It's possible from a national security angle or perspective. But I think this demonstrates that it is important for government agencies to appreciate the import of the fundamental freedoms and rights that are protected by the Constitution, because the Bill of Rights binds every person and agency, even government agencies. This includes the Communication Authority.
Right.
So I think it is important that the conservatory orders that were issued by the High Court in Nairobi continue to demonstrate that media freedom is sacrosanct and very vital in the democratic body politic of Kenya.
Sure. I wonder what you reckon happens next, Mr. Bigambo, given the fact that so many of the issues that were raised in the main by the protesters, at least from where I'm sitting, remain unresolved, including, of course, the very real concerns about how the Kenyan police respond to dissent. I mean, Alberto Zhuang's death, this political blogger, some people might say, is a case in point. Lives have been lost, infrastructure has been damaged, businesses are counting the cost, but it seems none of the issues are resolved.
There are there are multifarious issues that need to be handled by the government. One of those issues is how to bring an end to extrajudicial executions. Two, the aspect of restorative justice. to families of those who were extrajudicially extinguished from the earth, the issue of compensation of those who were injured. But beyond that, the vitalness of state agencies such as the Independent Policing Oversight Authority to be conducting expeditious investigations and having those police officers that are found culpable, having charges pressed against them by the Director of Public Prosecutions, who must and always acts in public interest, and it is an independent office. Secondly, it is important for the police to be more civil and be a service and not a force. Thirdly, there is the need to further police reforms to find an interlink of civility between the police service and civilians, so that the police do not consider civilians as enemies and civilians do not consider police officers as their enemies. The other thing that is very important is how the country or the government can deal with the challenge of the youth bulge. Many of the persons who poured on the streets yesterday and even in former times, majority are young people, unemployed or others not in any gainful employment. Many of them in the ages of between 20 to 30 or 35. Many of them don't even have businesses. So there is the aspect of hopelessness, but also appreciating that when you look at the demographics, close to 63% or 70% of the Kenyan population are young people. So the government needs to take the issue of youth bulge and youth unemployment very seriously, not just on the issues of the challenges being raised by the young people, right, but even economic progression moving forward into the next decade or two.
Sure. It's an all too familiar sight in Africa, isn't it? But hopefully Kenya charts a different route in getting out of this quagmire. Jarvis Bigambo, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Mr. Bigambo is a lawyer and a governance analyst, live to us from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi.